No reserve fund transfers, I take it?
No, Madam Chair.
Any excused absent members? So who's, Michelle Ford is excused, Andy Roth is excused, and Brian LeMay is excused. Is there anybody else? 9, that's perfect. They're all excused. Review and discuss FY17 budgets, Department of Natural Resources budget. Mr. Mullen, please come up. Would you like to introduce yourself, and then we'll go around because we have some new members, so some of us you know and some of us you don't.
Great. I'm Tim Mullen. I've been working for the town DNR for 16 years in May.
Wow. And Karen, you want to start and kind of just go around?
Speak into the microphone.
Don't swallow it.
Alrighty.
Bill?
Bill Town.
George Slade.
John Redmond.
Mary Jane Mastrangelo?
Kathleen Legacy.
Jeff Perry.
Judy Conrad.
Rich LeBoy.
Okay. Don't have a prescribed way of going through this. You've given us a lot of information, some of which some of the members only got today because, do you have any specific thing you'd like to start with? You want us to ask you our questions, or would you like to just talk about things in general?
However, I tried to give you a little bit of not so much background information, but what we've done recently in the last year or so. That was one of the questions on the questionnaire. So I tried to go into a little bit of detail on that, just to give people an idea of what we do, because we are all over the place with our different responsibilities and stuff.
I thought your document on accomplishments was really interesting. I thought it gave us a really great background. And in terms of all the different aspects of the department, including animal control and shellfish and oysters, waterways and marinas.
Yeah, the animal control are, both domestic and and the wildlife issues that we deal with. I mean, that's day in and day out. That's year round. That's the busiest thing we do, really. I mean, that's
The animal control.
yeah, because it is all over the map, and we respond to most everything except nuisance animal problems. Like we won't take squirrels out of your chimney and stuff like that. But we do an awful lot of rescues. People are pretty aware these days of the wildlife in town, and we make a lot of trips down Cape to the wildlife rehabilitator down in Barnstable. I mean, anything from small sea turtles to baby possums to shorebirds. And we try to take everything pretty seriously. People kind of kid us about there being no shortage of seagulls and stuff, but that is what we do, and we do our best to take care of what we can.
Does anyone have any specific questions they want to ask?
Yeah, I got a
Jim?
couple. Okay. You referenced the mooring fees, and would these be in line with other towns on the Cape that, you know, have moorings and?
We're about middle of the road. Some of the other towns, they charge by foot, which is, I mean, if you read the statute and stuff, you really can't do that. Eventually, someone's going to get challenged on that, but you know, we stick to the flat fee, and we're about in the middle of the road on that.
In paragraph 10 on the report that some of us got earlier, you indicate any additional revenue generating possibilities within your department. You make the moorings and it wouldn't increase that at the time, but you talked about 70 docks that have been paying mooring fees but are not been assessed a property tax. Is this somebody that might have a boat there but is not paying an excise tax to the town?
No, that's an actual dock that you know, is Chapter 91 licensed through DEP. It's a permanent structure. There were that many of them that weren't being assessed at all.
So the assessors would do that, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like a garage. I mean, it's like you get assessed for your garage as
Right.
an outbuilding or a shed, and then, so a dock is an additional assessment for
Right.
your property value.
Excuse me, when you said
Considerable.
you worked with the assessor, was that the impetus behind that comment? Because I think that was one of your accomplishments.
Right.
It didn't really go into detail.
Yeah,
but
right,
that's
yeah.
probably
I
what
was-
it
It was in detail, actually, there was it was in that other, it kind of got in that other paragraph, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yep, I referenced that in number 3, and then went into it in detail in the accomplishment document.
You seem kind of adamant that you don't want to increase the shellfish fees.
No, I think that's something that you know, we really should try to keep affordable and let people take advantage of it. I'm not crazy about the non-resident fee, but that's only because I'm a non-resident. But that is at $175 for a Massachusetts resident. I think that's the highest on Cape Cod.
You mentioned the fuel also. I guess you might talk about this too, maybe, Tom. When do we contract for fuel? We have a contract, I guess some years we've come out smelling like a rose, and other times it's dropped precipitously. But is there a particular time of year that you do it as far as the marinas are concerned?
Fiscal, we opted out of the county bid this year, and as we did last year, we'll put it out to bid ourselves. We don't get a fixed rate like all the other departments in town. We have to go with the market rate just to stay competitive with all the other marinas.
Oh, marina gas isn't that competitive, I don't think.
No, you're right.
But they would be paying on an ongoing basis when the same as you. In other words, not like the contracted that we do for our fleet works on a different way, right?
That's fixed.
Right, we do a fixed rate for all of the vehicles and diesel fuel and gasoline. For the marinas, we do what they call OEP, which is a floating rate. It's a tanker price. It's a price off the tanker rate, plus we have taxes that we have to pay on top of that as well. That allows the DNR to stay competitive with what the other gas, if for some reason we got a bid and it was higher and then the gas price came down like it did this year and they were stuck with a fixed rate, they wouldn't be able to adjust. If it goes up or down, they're able to adjust, and then they're able to keep their their markup, if you will, constant on the per gallon price, on a per gallon rate.
Okay. I'm all set for a second.
George?
Yeah, I appreciate all the work that you put into this.
Oh, no
because
problem.
It really is, you know, if you read through this, it's kind of enlightening. I mean, I knew a lot about, you know, what goes on, but not nearly as much as I just was added to. But anyway, it's interesting because you have we have a lot of coastline here in this town, so it's like a big asset. And it's like a business model too, because from what I could see, it looks like you earned about $1.6 million in revenue against expenses of just less than $1.1 million. In other words, it looks like you bring in around. Am I looking this over simply? That
No,
I mean, I
that's
realize
fairly
without
accurate, yeah.
shared costs and
No, that's
and stuff.
fairly accurate
But-
in a gross
gross
revenue.
profit. Yeah,
But
it's
this doesn't include waterways, right? The boat excise is not in this number.
Boat excise is not in that.
but basically it's you have a lot of the elements of an enterprise fund in a way. Because you're generating revenue that's offset by expenses, and if you have to be worried that if you cut the expenses too much, vis-a-vis a failed override, then it becomes a threat to generating revenue, or it could do. If we I think you mentioned it ad nauseum that you have a shortage in town hall as far as the person processing permits, and that's kind of backs things up when people come in, especially during the warmer months in April and May, where they're queuing up and probably becoming impatient because they don't have, we anticipate not having the adequate staff to really process people as professionally as we would like to. And that,
Right.
It also takes away from DNR officers who will back up the counter, if you will, as well. So a DNR officer will be working the desk as opposed to being out in the field, and that certainly takes away from some of the things they do as well. But it's
But without, going into, the synergies, I think you've already discussed elsewhere where you've combined some positions. And I don't have it right in front of me, but, I can see where you've at least thought about that. But I'm just wondering, is technology being used to its maximum? In other words, where you have a database where if somebody comes in for what is actually a renewal, are they able to bring this stuff up quickly
Yeah.
without starting from scratch?
Yeah,
So-
we have all that information maintained in the database. We just, we ask for an ID and stuff just to verify their, address is still current or whatever. But, yep, we have all that available in the database, and that does help to speed things up. But the phone's always ringing. I mean, everything gears up in the spring. There'll be people at the counter. There'll be, the phone's ringing with, people that are just getting back into the area with questions on, God knows, and anything from a beach sticker to, when do I have to get my mooring inspected, or a barking dog, and a lot happens in the spring. This will be the third time in the last 10 years that that position's been eliminated, and you're right. People do get aggravated. They think they're going to run into town hall for 5 minutes, and they find themselves being there for 15 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
and
It's like they're at the registry.
unfortunately, yeah.
And you'd mentioned also that you're looking, one of your goals is to maximize I guess the revenue, if you will, from the mooring fees and I guess slip fees. That, in other words, we have a situation that where we have a supply and demand situation where the
The marinas.
demand really outdoes the supply. So in a perfect world where everything is humming along nicely, we would have 100%, the maximum revenue derived from the moorings, because they'd be filled at all times. Somebody's ready to turn in there, or they don't renew, then boom, somebody's right there and we can max it out. And that's wishful thinking, I think. But I mean, how much, I guess, are we, what are we being penalized by not being able to capture all that revenue? In other words, I have
We
the
we
figures.
are 100% occupied at the marinas every year, and we do have a waiting list. Now, the only way to maximize it further would be in the marinas and stuff. The fees they are per foot, where with a private mooring, statute prevents you from doing that. But in the marinas, it is a per foot charge.
Yeah.
So the only way to maximize our profits further than being 100% occupied would be to be renting slips to larger boats.
Yeah, but you can't do, yeah, so that's, I guess as long as they're, you know, you're operating under a certain protocol, you know, people have to wait in line, and
Yep.
if somebody leaves with a, you know, a longer boat and it's being replaced with a shorter boat, we're gonna get less revenue, in other words.
Well, yeah or no. I mean, we do have the option of bypassing someone on the waiting list. You know, if I have a slip that can accommodate, you know, up to a 40-foot boat, we will bypass people that, you know, have 25-foot boats and go to that person with the 40 or 41-foot boat just to maximize, you know, the income opportunity. But you know, for the most part, it does work out that we pretty much do follow the order of the waiting list, almost like 100%.
Yeah, but you actually are able to charge a minimum, you know, nominal fee to keep your name, for a person to keep their name on the list, is that correct?
Not at the marinas.
No.
We don't charge an annual fee to maintain your position on that list, but we do with the private moorings. You know, where people are, you know, paying $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 for a boat slip when they finally do get it. Yeah, we don't charge an annual maintenance fee, but we do with the private moorings for a couple of different reasons. It is labor intensive to maintain the list, and it also it's one more step that people have to follow to maintain their position on the list. Initially, we didn't charge, and you know, people would just stay on the list and not necessarily, you know, want something right away.
Right.
So at least we know now it's only $10, but $10 is $10, and you know, we know that people are serious.
Yeah, well, that's a good way to vet that, I think. But anyway, there are certain areas of town where you know, that are obvious money makers, like the moorings, and you know, once they're established, then there's not too much maintenance involved with those. But you have shellfish propagation, which is something that has to be nurtured, done correctly, and I'm assuming the permits derived, you know, the permit sales and the propagation fees are somewhat in line. I mean, is this something that it's a luxury to have our own propagation program yet?
No. We used to fund the propagation with annual town meeting articles, and it was always about $15,000 a year to purchase seed or purchase shellfish through the contaminated relay program at Marine Fisheries and stuff. But about 8 years ago, we opted to take $15 of every $35 recreational permit fee and put that right into a revolving propagation fund. So that covers the cost of our seed. It covers the cost of a good amount of the materials that we have to purchase. Not so much the labor, but it's worked out well.
Okay.
Have you thought about rearranging the Monument Beach Marina on the floats off the main dock on the south side? The former person prior to you put those floats in there, and it eliminated about 8 feet of boatage that you could actually charge for.
To be honest with you, not really. No.
Because, you know, I think it holds 11 boats there at 8 foot of, 8 feet more.
No, you're right.
That would max maximize more income and less floats to handle the foot in and out
Yep,
during the winter.
that's true.
Is that, you're talking about when you go out to the marina on the left, as you're
Yeah, on the
walking
south
out
side
on
Towards Little Bay.
the left?
Toward,
Walking out of the dock,
toward where
on the
Eleanor.
left. There used to be, you used to have boats on the, now it's like a dinghy dock area, but there used to be boats. We used to have our boat, I think.
No, I'm talking about the main dock.
Okay,
There used to be, slips going there, 11 slips, and they were good for 40-foot boats.
Yeah.
And Weinstein, I believe, was the, I think that's his name, was it?
Weinert, George Weinert.
That's appropriate. He changed that by putting a whole row of floating docks behind where the 40-footers used to go. So every boat that you put in there, you just lost 8 feet, 8 feet, 8 feet all the way down the dock. Because that would help maximize the money that you take in, because you get more footage.
do you have boats, I mean, are there people already on those spaces now, or no?
Yeah, it's all full, but,
I would think you'd have enough turnover over the period of time to maybe start doing towards something like that, so you get the bigger boats in there.
I mean, it was a significant investment when he did reconfigure it and had all those docks and stuff built. So we weren't in any hurry to, reconfigure it again. To be honest with you, I'd be leery of people's expertise with boat handling to have much more than a 40-footer. In any of those slips right now.
Right now, just taking off the top of my head, it looked like mostly in the 30-foot range, maybe 28.
35, few 35, a lot around 30. We have had a couple of 40-footers in there with that new configuration over the last, it's been since
It must be pushing the bows out into the open space quite a bit,
oh yeah,
because used to be 40-footers there without the floats behind it.
right,
And
yeah.
now when you got the floats there, that pushes the boat out.
That's
into
right.
the,
It's
travel
it's
area.
tough. And it's tough docking in there too with the with the prevailing southwest wind in there, as you know, and most of those boats that are on that side now, they don't go out too often, especially the larger ones. They're
They never did.
they're no, I mean they're a lot of
The Chardonnay.
yeah, and they still are.
So it doesn't matter, 40-footers sitting in there and.
Used to be one there without an engine.
Well, one
Did they have roulette table?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean if
I'm just thinking of maximizing income, because if my memory serves me correctly, we used to be about 1,700 feet of boat space in there. And you could always plan on the 1,700
Yeah.
feet, and that 11 would be 88 feet more,
no, you're right. It's with the exception
It really
of those
costs money
docks.
to
it's-
do that, but, he should never have done it in the first place.
I think he was trying to make it easier for people, was his intent. It did eliminate, four gangways going down? 5 gangways going down.
5 games anyways, because the first one was on the beginning of the L.
Right, right.
Oh, well.
Do you have a particular time of year that you're busier than others as far as people getting the parking stickers and that sort of thing? And I'm wondering whether or not you could bring in an intern or somebody for a couple of the peak weeks to stem the tide, or is it pretty much,
April, May, June.
yeah, so it'd be 90 days anyway. And the slip rates versus, and I think what you said is that you don't have to pay a deposit to keep your name on the list for a slip at any of the
The
marines,
marinas.
right? And I think that maybe consistent with what they did in Sandwich. You could be on the list, and then they would probably, when you got closer to getting one, they'd send you a registered letter to find out if you still want to do it. But our rates versus theirs, I mean, are we pretty comparable? That's a municipal marina, or is there?
Theirs used to be a lot less. I can remember when they were $60 a foot over there, and that was only maybe 7 or 8 years ago.
Okay.
And we were about $100 a foot then. They have since gone up, and they're more in line with what we are now.
Right. Yeah, because they've got a pretty long waiting list too.
Oh yeah, yeah. It was decades long at one point. You couldn't get on it anymore. They did stop taking names for a few years, but when they raised the rates, that things started to move along a little bit quicker.
Right.
Just,
I have a question about, it's kind of a combination question. So, which, by that I mean it goes to both the town administrator and to Tim. So, we got a printout on the Waterways Fund from Linda at a recent meeting. And the Waterways Fund has ending balances kind of been going up, with the exception of FY16, when we put $263,000 into a lot of that went into the parking lot at Taylor's Point. So we took a big chunk out to do the parking lot at Taylor's Point. So it shows this year that there's going to be $17,993 less taken out of the Waterways Fund than was for FY17, take out about $18,000 less from the Waterways Fund. But if we took, which is like half of the salary of the person that was cut, I mean, would it be reasonable to use that money from the Waterways Fund and to keep that person to do some of these like 5,000 permits and all the other work that has to be done? I'm not sure that I understand the justification for taking less money out of the Waterways Fund that's growing and not having a person working to do the work in the Department of Natural Resources that has to be done that could be funded through the Waterways Fund that comes from boat excise tax.
I think if we go back a couple of years, there has been a discussion, and it's apparently going to continue, on whether the Waterways Fund should be utilized for administrative support or staffing, or to be used directly for the upkeep and improvement of the waterways themselves, be it the ocean side waterways or other types of things. So when we first started, was it 3 years ago to take money for staff, we were very clear at the time that we didn't think this was a good idea. But because of the position the town was in at the time, that it made sense to do this for that year. We then added another half-time position to come out of that, half of a full-time position to come out of that, again under some I guess fairly fruitful discussion on the merits of that. And there's still, 2 points of view relative to that, and I think there's validity to both points of view. The idea of when we made the reductions, we looked at staffing levels, not that everyone was going to be impacted on any of the staffing levels that we reduced, because we're kind of at zero-sum game minimum in most of the departments now. in feeling that a half-time or 17, taking, that position was gonna take 17,000 out of the general, add $17,000 back into the general fund that we would have spent. We eliminated the entire position. There were other positions that, in my opinion, Tim would disagree, I know, you being his department, that I believe are more critical, that we've eliminated as well. That if we were to put money back in from the general fund, that wouldn't be one of the priorities. It would be a priority, but not one of the top 2 or 3. It is a policy discussion on whether that is a good use of waterways funds or not. And I'm certainly open to that discussion, but for the purposes of what we did in the fall, it was filtering things down as best we saw we could without further impacting another $20,000 or $17,000 out of other departments, because it would have had to come from somewhere. Now, the question that John raised relative to interim services or part-time services, that may be something to, short-term services may be something to look at that directly deals with that, but on a 12-month basis, I'm not sure I'm clearly answering your question.
I'm just asking, I mean, one of the things is when you start looking at all the Department of Natural Resources does, the varied animal control, shellfish, patrolling, permits, and I can tell you, because my husband is a harbor, one of
Cove master.
Cove master, that the amount of work and paperwork and communication around the 4 different steps for anyone to get, once they're awarded the mooring. I mean, there's
Right.
3 different sets of paperwork that have to happen, and it happens all through the summer. I mean, it happens in the spring, it happens in the summer, it happens, so it's, and that's, I mean, I know just from personal experience, I know what kind of work it is. So you have people that are paying for moorings, and you have people that are paying for boat excise, and you have people that are paying for beach stickers, and you have people that are having, and to have those people need to wait in line longer in order to give the town revenue. I have a bit of an issue with that, and it goes back to how many times can you remember when the federal government was facing, a shutdown in government because they hadn't agreed on the budget, and it happened to 4th of July weekend, and they closed all the national parks so that people would be impacted by the budget crisis that the federal government was having. So,
Gets their attention.
Well,
it gets them mad. It gets them to re-vote for someone else in the legislature. So we're in discussion here, and I need to understand the thinking. We've discussed at Capitol. What should we be using the waterways for? Should we be spending more? Should we be spending less? I think the money that we're receiving from boat excise, because, I mean, the waterways fund revenue's going up. The permits, we raised all the permit revenue, so that's been going up. So I think we need to have some respect for the additional revenue that the town is receiving that is directly related to this service, and we need to think about making sure that that service is provided, whether it's with a part-time person or with some temporary people or people, I mean, maybe there's people that want to work from April to July every year, I don't know, so.
Possible, we used to get people sometimes that wanted to reduce their real estate taxes.
The tax write-off folks are very good in a number of areas. Some of the issues we have with that, and it's not you don't get the repeat customer.
I know you gotta train them.
Yeah, and
Yeah, I
by the
know,
time
it's a
we
training
train them, their
involved.
time is up, especially as the minimum wage increases, their number of hours comes down as well. And they're wonderful. Well, I know the town clerk, really depends on it, as do some other departments, but in something like DNR, the training would take as long, if not longer, and you're not guaranteed the repeat client to come back to work. I don't think I disagree with your
I mean,
your thought.
I
but
think we have
think that can be-
17,000 coming out of the waterways fund. Could we think about leaving the waterways fund at the same level that it was and having a half-time person, administrative person in that department, whether it's for certain months of the year or certain half hours all year or whatever? I mean, it's just something that,
I think it's worthy of further discussion. I'm not, it doesn't matter if I'm opposed to it or not. It's really the selectmen's budget at this
Right.
point. But depending how you want to read that, yes, let's just leave it at that. It's worthy of further
I
discussion.
think it's something we should talk about a little bit more. I mean,
I know that Tim, I've seen it. I mean, I've seen it 3 times over the last 11 years. He has been able, even when there's 2 people on desk, if you will, you still get lines. He now has some folks trained that in the period where they're not necessarily out on the waterways per se, they certainly are diverted from other things they would do, but we have it pretty well, I think, covered. I think it's as well taken care of as otherwise. But it certainly is worthy of further discussion on how we utilize revenues that come in.
It's way easier to manage in the off-season, but in the spring, when everything hits us at the same time, I mean, that's the bulk of the people are coming in for their shellfish permits. They're coming in for their beach stickers. They're coming back to the area, and, they have mooring issues to deal with. We're gearing up with all of our shellfish propagation at that time. We're putting the marinas back into the water. All my people are out in the field. I mean, everything's happening at once, so it's difficult to to back up that person at the counter during those spring months. I mean, we just can't be everywhere at the same time, basically.
You can make a similar argument, although not from revenue-derived sources, in the assessor's office, where we've gone down to 1 administrative support staff instead of 2 during those periods of time where the abatements are due and
Right.
all of that time. I mean, you can make that, we have those periods of time in a number of departments that are seasonal or quarterly or semi-annual, and there is impact. This is a little different because you have some
I
revenues
think it's a
being
little different
derived.
because you're talking about it. You're talking about a department that generates revenue, that generates through, I mean, not even counting the waterways revenue for the boat excise, is generating $500,000 or $600,000 of excess revenue over the cost of the department, which helps a lot of other departments in the town. And you're having residents who are coming to give us money, and
We're making it difficult to get it.
Yeah, right, that's right.
I don't get that. I mean,
Yeah, I think that.
because you might have fewer people. So
Right.
it's just food for thought.
I think it's a valid discussion point. I think that the rationale at the time was what it is, and we certainly can revisit that as we move the budget forward.
I would, Madam Chair,
Yes, Bill.
I would certainly support that concept wholeheartedly, 1,000%. And I think that discussion should go forward because I think it's a valid piece. And you are talking about a location of revenue that is available, and we're not going into anything on the tax base or anything else like that that is there that could be applied to do that without impacting general budget.
I think it's worthy of further discussion. I wouldn't disagree with all, Dr. Town.
I have a question about turnbacks. So, we got a 3-year history of turnbacks, and I didn't really give you any warning about this, so last year there was like 61,000, of which about 25,000 was salaries and 35,000 was expenses. The prior year there was only like 29,000 of turnbacks. The salary turnbacks seem to run about $23,000 to $30,000. Can you explain that? Is that like unfilled positions that are in the budget, or is it lots of overtime, or is it good management of the department?
Of course. a good chunk of that, I think, is, it's our reimbursement from the pump out grant that we get.
Okay.
It gets posted back in at the end of the
Oh, I
fiscal
see.
year. A certain percentage, Linda, divvies up for expenses and for salaries, because everything that we spend up to whatever they give us that year for the grant, 75% of that is reimbursable through the Clean Vessel Act grant.
How much is that, about that amount of money, like the $50,000-$60,000 a year that we get for that, or?
No, that's about, if we don't have any capital expenses that they're willing to help us with, it runs about $20,000.
Okay.
If we do have capital expenses like a new pump out system we put in at Kingman and Parker's and
Is that still
Taylor
going back
Point.
into the budget?
Yes.
It goes back into the budget even though it was a capital expense, or is that?
If it wasn't a capital outlay
Okay.
expense, yes.
So you're talking within the maintenance and operation capital in line items in your budget, you might be applying for money and getting reimbursed, and that would,
We definitely
Okay.
do, yeah. I mean, I might not be getting funding for it through capital outlay for
Okay.
like an $8,000 system, but I do apply for the money ahead of time, tell the Division of Marine Fisheries who administers it. I have to let them know a year ahead of time what capital expenses we would like to apply for.
It doesn't mean you're gonna get it, though.
That's true. There's a lot of years that we don't. In fact, we purchased one of our boats without any grant money, unfortunately, but that was 6 years ago. We just couldn't wait any longer.
Well, one of the things, if I could, one of the things that Tim has done, and we started working on this years ago, and it's, I think you've noticed, I think you've been on it, and Judy's been on it, and John, you've noticed, that 7 or 8 years ago, we had the line items just didn't line up with any of the expenditures. We had line items that we didn't even know actually what they were. Tim and I started to work together, and then Tim's been refining it over the years to really figure out what line item spends what. So you have a pretty good, if you go down through his line items, you have a pretty good sense. We had that $10,000 line item, this is what, 9 years or so ago. We had no idea what it was for. And we really didn't, and we had to figure out, we really tore it down to the beginning and started building it up again. So you have a pretty good idea on what happens in all of these.
Yeah, that was before I was the director. I pay all the bills myself now, and I charge it to each specific line item, so I know exactly, what I'm spending, where I'm spending it, when I'm spending it. I'm just a lot more comfortable doing it that way, especially given the fact that it's, it's what, a 12-page budget.
yeah. Well, it's one of those budgets where it has those different sections,
Right.
So you could have one person or one thing that's charged in like 3 different, like sometimes it's under DNR and sometimes it's under harbor and sometimes it's under animal, it's very complex. I have another question, I can't remember what it is. So this year, the secretary position was eliminated, but the money is still actually in the budget in the waterways. So that could actually be addressed even this year too, if we come up with some sort of figure out what we could do.
It could be, yes.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Is there anything else that's like majorly different that sticks out in your?
Not really.
I have a question about the gasoline for Monument Beach.
That's down a
Supplies.
little bit.
Yeah, so it's sort of been budgeted at $80,000, which it came in under in 2015. 2016, I don't know how much under it's gonna be. Because we're at 53,009 through 211, and you still have a lot of the spring. You have May and June anyway, right?
Mm-hmm.
Eight-
I mean, typically, we don't sell a whole lot of gas in
amount of
May.
time. And do you have gas or is it gone from, is it usually gone at the end of the
That's,
season?
yeah, it's
or-
a small tank. Anyway, it's a 2,000-gallon tank.
So 65,000 could kind of depend on what happens with gas prices.
Well, the current bid that we have is substantially down. We didn't want to bring it down the full percentage in any of the budgets, but we brought it down in all of the budgets, if you look, for the most part. This should, based on what we've seen, okay, now we could have the best summer ever, and that's gonna make things change, or we could have a very rainy summer, and that's gonna make things change. But based on the numbers that we've gotten from what we've seen in the bids so far, we rejected those bids because they were all for premium gas, and that's not what we
Okay.
wanted. Based on what we've seen, this should be plenty.
Okay. And a lot of this depends, this is the expense side of the gas that we purchase to sell. And so the selling of the gas doesn't offset this line, it goes someplace else. Is that correct, or does it offset, it goes someplace else?
Yeah.
We can't have a revolving on it because
Yeah.
it wasn't set up as a revolving. We've tried to do that, and DOR has told us, since it's been a budgetary item this way, we can't go and change it to a different kind
Right,
of
so this
fund.
is only the expense side of it, and there's offsetting revenue to this
You can add
that's gonna be more.
20% to that.
Right, so you mark up 20%, so the revenue is on the 20% markup. Okay, thank you.
About $13,000.
We don't make a lot of money on it. It's more of a service than a money maker.
Yeah, and it's very convenient if you have a boat at the marina to
Right.
be able to gas up right there and not have to go someplace else. Okay, I think this is, I don't know, anybody else have any questions for Tim?
Just one other thing, and you may be more involved with this than the rest of
Oh.
us, you and John,
Oh,
the
the Master
municipal,
Harbor, the municipal
harbor
harbor
plan.
plan?
which looks like it's about $55,000 to $60,000 to implement something like this with and I guess, is there any, it says this project could be 100% funded through the Waterway Improvement Fund. I don't know, does that mean it's just an allocation?
Right, and
Pro-
actually, this kind of came out of the capital outlay discussion that we had.
Yeah.
The 12th, last week. Wow, seems like, seems like
Oh,
longer.
I didn't attend the meeting, but, okay,
Right, and,
should have.
so one of the things that Tim has done is he's worked for the dredging permits to get them into one master permit so that it eliminates a lot of the paperwork and cost and time associated with it. And we were talking about the ramps at the Monument Beach Marina, which is a very large project, and whether that should come out of the Waterways Fund or whether we should borrow for it. And we actually thought, as this came up in the meeting, that this was a good use of the Waterways Fund for capital, for planning, so that it would be $50,000 to come out of the planning, the Waterways Fund, that would allow us to have a municipal harbor plan. And maybe you can explain better, you can explain better the advantages of doing this, but.
It would be a long-range plan, and we'd have the opportunity to have some negotiating, if you will, when it comes to getting a license. Like through DEP right now, everything's pretty cut in stone. With a municipal harbor plan, the coastal zone management, Mass DEP, they're a lot more willing to sit down with you, and there's more flexibility there. Things aren't as cut and dry. It would give us the opportunity to have a long-range plan that would ensure that our coastline was managed the way we would like to see it managed, not just next year or the year after, but, 5, 10, 15, 20 years down, 30, 40 years down the road. It's a great tool. It's a good way of ensuring that your coastline is going to stay the way you want it, or improve the way you want it, or and everything's on a permit or on a license, and it cuts out a lot of the consulting fees and stuff that you'd have to pay to get individual licenses, similar to what we did at the Monument Beach Marina. Down there, we got a comprehensive marina reconfiguration permit, it's called, but it licenses all of Finney's Harbor for dredging. It licenses the marina, the parking lot, the septic system, everything right up to the railroad tracks. So it's all included under one permit. So all we have to do now is basically write a letter when we want to do a project, and the septic system was included under that when we did that improvement, repaving the parking lot down there. The entire mooring field is now licensed. Any dredging between Finney's Harbor and Little Bay, or anywhere else out in Finney's Harbor, is all included as well. Not only does it save money, but it also saves time. I mean, like dredging permits, take us like 3 years to get. It's just such a long, slow, drawn out process. Not on our end, but with the other various state and federal agencies and stuff. So
Without, going into it too far, there's a topic here, revenue generated by project implementation. It's hard to quantify something like this. You just know that things would, you'd probably be able to generate more revenue because things would be a little bit more streamlined, or expenses would be cut. But it's hard to, you don't want to hazard a guess, or because that's the sexy part of this is, invest this money up front and we can give you back what you'll earn. And you said this has a useful life of, I'm sure these plans would have to be, fine-tuned from year to year, but basically once you get the plan in place, it would have to be, it would
It simplifies.
value.
It simplifies, because I know from capital outlay, the permitting of everything that we try to do is,
Dredging is awful.
right.
anything that's
Even with
environmental.
is this part of that, one of the things you talked about is if we had this municipal harbor plan, we knew when our dredging was happening that we could then, schedule the county dredge, or is that all part of that municipal dredge, that master dredging
Yeah, that would
permit?
be under that master dredge permit, but we would also work that into the municipal harbor plan, obviously. Dredging's a huge part of any waterfront community, and we would definitely want that included on it.
Right, so if you don't know that you're gonna have a permit, you can't schedule the county dredge, and then if you can't schedule it, someone else schedules it, and then you can't do it, so then you get your permit and you can't do your dredging because you don't have anyone to dredge.
And there's a limited time window. There's different time of year restrictions. They're worried about, winter flounder habitat or horseshoe crabs, and you certainly don't want to be dredging in the middle of summer during, everyone's vacation. It's not a pleasant project, as you might imagine. So doing it over the winter is optimum.
Okay.
A couple other quick things that Tim didn't mention. I know he talks about them a little bit, but perhaps for some of the newer folk, we do the herring runs. We maintain the herring runs. We watch the herring runs. That's a springtime event that we have to keep on top of in all 3 of the herring runs.
Yeah, at this point, there's really just one productive one.
That's this one here
on
down
the
on
canal, the
Warndale,
main
yeah.
one, yeah.
They take care of that. I don't think he really spoke highly enough of the shellfish propagation program, which has really done very well under his guidance. It's really expanded. We are getting a lot more shellfish out there for the recreational shellfisher person, and it's a lot of work. I think there's a lot of things that go under the radar that aren't boats, you know, that don't deal with the boats or the moorings or the slips that the DNR folks do on a daily basis. So the animal control, we had, he was talking about all different types of animals. We had, what, 2 little screech owls in there a couple of weeks ago that we were taking care of, and there's always some sort of wildlife in the garage, and it takes a lot of time and caring that these folks are trained to do. They have to go to the police academy every year,
You
all
get
of you?
recertified every
Yeah.
year, yes.
So there's a lot of other things that these folks do that I don't say flies below the radar, but is not news catching that they have to do to keep the department up and running.
Some of us are certified harbor masters. Everyone's gone through the police academy. Most of us have gone through the shellfish academy as well. And you do have to maintain all your certifications and stuff. But I have a great crew. I mean, everyone's been there now for 10 years or more. Everyone works well together. Everyone's, cross-trained, if you will. So we really, we can get a lot done with a small amount of people.
With this GZA, if in fact you proceed with this, would you be using them annually to do some of the functions for you after they do the overview on the entire projects that you have? Or would they set it up?
I don't even know, to be honest with you. I mean, we've used the same environmental consulting company to do all of our dredge permitting for decades, as far as I know. Somebody like GZA is a little bit more diversified, I think, and I'm not opposed to having all of our eggs in one basket, if you will.
Okay.
Tim, what was the dredging over by Hog Island? They were there for quite a while, and
Yep, they weren't doing any.
forcing the Hog Island, or?
No, they weren't doing any dredging there. Actually, they were just using that location as a staging area for what was going on down in Sandwich. Yeah, I mean, we got a lot of calls about that. Yeah,
I live near it, so I.
I'm sure you did.
Where he needed the secretary.
Getting the sand to put there on the beaches.
They were parked on my.
That would make way too much sense. Instead, I mean, when Cohasset Narrows was dredged last year, instead of, fortifying the dike, they actually put all the spoils, which some of the nicest sand in town came out of that location, in the old canal channel. Go figure.
Still scallops up in the hayfield?
Not many. Not many.
Get our information.
Yeah.
All right.
Be a good place.
All right, well, I think we're all set then. Thank you so much for coming in.
My
Really
pleasure.
appreciate it. And it was very informative, and all the work you put together was really, really informative too, so.
Anything to make it easier and a little bit less boring.
Yeah, but it is, I mean, for those of you that just got this today, it's really worth reading because it just really gives you a lot of information about what the department does and how broad range their stuff is. Okay, see if I can find my agenda now.
Thank you.
Thank
You're
you, Tim,
welcome.
very
Thank
much.
you.
Thanks, Tim.
Town administrator budget. we're gonna have a brief overview from the town administrator, because
Yeah,
talk about competing,
yeah, that was,
Yeah, well, we're
it
not-
just happened, so. This would be under tab 4. It also varies out through various pieces in the budget. A couple of things that stick out, I wanna, as people will ask. We currently, in my office with the Board of Selectmen, have 2.5 FTEs. The intent was to bring that down to 2 FTEs after the override failure. The selectmen have opted to continue the half-time FTE moving forward, and I can tell you that with a person being out right now on a long-term basis, and it's just one administrative support person and myself a couple of days a week, it is absolutely necessary to have that.
well, Peter answered the phone one time when I called over there.
Peter's very helpful.
And ran down
You know, we have to call Tim in from time to time to cover, to cover lunches. That's one of the things that he didn't tell you with this other administrative support person not being there, who we would call in to cover lunches for at various times. You know, DNR officer or somebody may be in there to help out too. So it doesn't happen very often, but it's one of those types of things. So that person is back in, and if you look, at one point in time, not too many years ago, there were 3.5 FTEs in that department, and it's been at 2.5 FTEs since 2006, probably 2008. We had brought a person back.
You owe us a FTE, so.
I understand
Yeah.
that. And that hasn't changed at
Yeah,
all. and
yeah,
I don't-
but we're
Right.
doing it by department, because
Yep.
a big sheet is too much to handle. I think if we get it by department for the 5 years.
I agree.
You
Yep.
got an extension on that,
I appreciate that too.
yeah.
Town council called today for some things, and so that's fine. Pretty much everything else is either level or reduced. The other contracted services piece on the line item, which is 5294, we try to keep some money in there for the selectmen or the town administrator should we need assistance from expertise that we don't have in-house. We plan on using some of this for 208 startup monies if we need to going forward, and there are times when I just need to be able to call someone in that has, you know, expertise, be it on wage and classification or those types of things that we just don't have the internal expertise to have right now. The professional development line has gone back up to $4,000. The town administrator over the last couple of years has not attended either ICMA or National League of Cities conferences, and for continuing professional development purposes, I need to hit one of those every couple of years anyways. I have not in the past. This will be the second year or third year I have not, and I really do need to go to one once in a while, just to keep up on trends. Really, everything else is either level funded or down. I do note, if you look at the 17, I'm gonna go back up to the top of the page, the 5113, where the request was originally 73, I think 520. That was bringing over the HR coordinator's position into this area. That has been eliminated for the next year. I think that's something similar to the waterways discussion with staff. I think this is a, if not a full HR department, but certainly some areas to help with some of the civil service issues and those types of things. I think we need to have a body in there to help coordinate some of that and some of the other insurance offerings that we provide the employees, and I do want to revisit that with the selectmen as we move through this budget season, but right now it is out of there. The other lines are pretty, if you, there's really, unless you have specific questions about the line items here, the dues are ICMA and Mass Municipal Association, Mass Managers dues. I did not join ICMA this year to save some money, but again, you lose an awful lot of ability to access information by not being a member.
The the 5113, is that 1.5 persons in that line, or is that, how does it,
That would have been,
is that,
well, at the time, let me give you
what the request is for 36,000?
right, at the time this was originally put in,
Right,
it was without the halftime person being added back to the budget,
So-
and which would have dropped that down by some 13,000. That would have added come up to about the 52,000 we needed for the HR coordinator's position. The HR coordinator's position has come out, and the halftime administrative support person has come back in. So if you go back to FY16 at 32,729, it's in line with the similar staffing level at 36,112.
okay. But is that just the halftime person, or is there another piece of another?
That's part of Debbie as well.
Yeah, that's because she's paid a lot out of sewer.
She's
so
75% out of the sewer.
It's a
fund.
0.25 and a 0.5, right?
Correct.
0.25 and a 0.5, right? And that's in there in that 36?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else have questions about the town administrators? Okay. The other thing we had was administrative town hall budgets. It's kind of a broad
Right.
category. I don't,
One of the things I do want to talk to the finance committee about, and you've heard me chirp about this before, is we look to, you'll get organizational charts from the town planning department, and you'll get, you know, the optimum, if you had your optimum, what it would be. But moving back a level, there is no support staff, administrative support staff for conservation, engineering, planning. There used to be 1.5 people in that, then there was a full-time person, and now there is none. In the area of building and permits, there was at one point 2.5 people in there. There is now 1.5, and that's only because we combined we reduced a position at the DPW to halftime, and we kind of augmented over the other side halftime. DPW needs really the 2 positions in their department. But we have days when there are folks on vacation where there's no administrative support staff up there. I noted in my budget message to the selectmen, and I think it's in your written report, moving back upstairs a little bit to the management level or the mid-management level where we have departments of 1. When folks are out, there is no one to cover that service, and I think there was 286 days to date through a course of a year that there would be no service in aggregate, between sick leave and vacation time and whatever other time, professional development and those types of things. The town hall because it's not visible and it's kind of the work engine, if you will, it's the pistons of what goes on is been reduced a little bit this year, a little bit the year before, a little bit the year before, a little bit the year before. So there's not, you know, a great impact at once that you see, like when we have to make big cuts when there's an override failure. There have been systematic cuts in these departments over the last several years in an effort to try to keep things balanced, and we're at the point now where we really don't have a lot of places left to go. There used to be 2 full-time people in IT. There's now 1 person in IT. And technology has changed considerably since it was a data processing office. And it's really hard to keep all those things up. And when things need to be more web-based, you know, there's not really a lot of folks there to do that. My request to the Finance Committee is that we need to start to look systematically at starting, as we can, and I understand we're in a very difficult position, but to start systematically looking at priorities on where we need to build some of this back up. And I would suggest the priorities would be in the planning, engineering, conservation area, to the permitting area, and we certainly need to do something in the IT area as well. There's not a department in town that can't justify the need for something. We could always justify the need for something. But from an administrative perspective, I think we really need to look there. The town clerk's office, this reduction, although we will fill the full-time position, that was cut to a half-time position. That is going to have, we're going to have to come back and I think revisit that. I'm not sure that in the long run is going to be a sustainable reduction either.
Well, and with that, I mean, the town clerk, that was a half-time position, and he raised fees so that he could make that into a
Right.
full-time position, and now it's, you know, so.
Well, we're utilizing monies in other areas.
I
It's-
know, I know.
They're not, it's nice, and he did a really good job with that, but they're not silos. And when we get into a crunch position, we can't look at them as
Thing is-
separate little businesses. They all are part of the whole.
So I'm looking at this proposed organization, because
That's back in.
it's with the, because you
tab.
started talking about organization, and I started looking at this old, like,
That's
you know.
kind of semi-current, but not
Yeah,
really.
but the direct report, I think I counted like 19 or something.
Right.
You know, and
If you look to the next page,
yeah, the next page, this is, I like this idea because it starts, and when you start talking about the next
Yeah.
page, it should look like this.
Just what
The
page,
next
Catherine?
page,
Just to fold that one and the one that I can run through.
yeah. It's in, section,
One.
it's the very last 2 pages of section 1. So this changes, I mean, down to 7 direct reports, which is a lot better than, I don't know, 16 or 19 or something was where it was. But it also, when you start talking about administrative, if you start having your administrative support sort of in that department, administrative support, that you can utilize people better because you're going to have communication within these sections that I think make a lot of sense.
you know, one of the things that we have found as things get more technologically, I don't want to say complex, but become more, there used to be a time where what we call an account clerk 3 or an administrative secretary 3 or 2 or 1, whatever, that the basic prerequisites for the position would be the same, and you could take an account clerk from X department and, you know, kind of pick them up and put them over in Y department without a lot of cross-training that has to be done. That's not necessarily the case anymore because we have an account clerk 2, 3, whatever, in assessors learns a different skill set over time than an account clerk two or an administrative secretary two in the police department. Where one may be doing assessing and working on a whole different set of software, and in the police department, they'll be doing payroll on Excel spreadsheets. And one set of skills, while excellent, doesn't necessarily transcend over to another. And with our contracts as they are, where there's bumping, it doesn't always work as smoothly as it would look on paper. So we need, with this, Selectman Meyer has been one of the strongest advocates for cross-training and that's an important thing to do, but skill sets are such where it's not always that easy, and it's not always that easy to take a person from Department A and put them in Department B, especially now in many departments where there's only one. You know, you can't pick them up and bring them over for a week or two.
But if you had a person that was a community economic development administrative support person, then they could do planning, they could learn the planning conservation appeals grants, they could work in that sort of general area and
In that sphere, right.
yes, and then you could, I mean, the library's kind of separate, but like senior services, parks, recreation, that, I mean, they're kind of both over here and they're in that same sphere. So there are ways that you could have people be more of a group.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a really good idea myself. I think.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, Judy.
Just who did this? Who
Um,
put this together?
Pretty much I
You
did.
did? Okay, that's all I want to know.
I had some
Since
assistants.
you're
We had a gentleman that was in
That's what I-
working.
Well, you should be doing this, because you're there.
Right, working with us over the summer, who was a CEO in a major hospital down in New York. And while I had his expertise, we sat down and we plugged in a number of different scenarios.
Right.
Trying to take it from
This
there.
actually, I've been looking at Barnstable, and this actually looks a lot like the Barnstable.
Yeah, we didn't get-
But I mean, it's
Yeah.
very similar, and I think of that because we have a lot of the same natural resource. You know, where some of these things that are different, that are kind of Cape things. So yeah, I kind
We
of
probably
like this.
looked at 15 or 20 different charts from many different communities. We had, the one that I did a few years ago wasn't a whole lot different than this. And I think one could pick and say, well, this really doesn't belong here, it may belong over here. This was really to instigate a discussion amongst my bosses. They may have different ideas and have better ideas, but at least the idea is to bring this up for
It's really
discussion.
good for discussion. I think it's great.
And the other thing that I do want to touch upon, although it's not general administration, it does go into our sewer and inspections division. I'm anticipating that we are going to, over the next few months, be looking to have a transition there. I have nothing formal, it's just that I think that that's going to happen within the next 12 to 18 months and maybe a little sooner. The person that we have now he's our plumbing and gas inspector, and he is our sewer system maintenance lead director. And he has
And
one.
sewer actually isn't on here.
Right, has one person, you're right, under, your waste management, it's under,
Is that?
that would be, well, that,
I don't know if
Yeah, I'm not
ISOM
sure.
and sewer. You got to kind of figure
Yeah.
out the ISOM and sewer enterprise things.
so, we have exceptional service from that department with that person, and I don't believe we're going to try to incorporate some back into the DPW, you know, where that's really where it belongs. But with the advent of a potential wastewater package plant here, it may make some sense, and the superintendent and I have spoken a couple of times on this, to bring a person in with a license, with licensure, that can help work both plants together and train another person to have the similar licensure to do that. The inspections gas and plumbing inspections piece as we move forward, we're going to have to bring someone on to do that as well, and that probably a half-time to three-quarter time person, similar to what we have. But we're certainly not gonna get the 3 o'clock in the morning going out because we are concerned about things all the time that we currently have with our existing legacy employees. We have a really dedicated group of legacy employees. And I just want to put the finance committee on notice
Well,
of that.
and one of the things that will be helpful, I think, as we go through this budget process and get really the FTEs sort of by
Right.
department, is when you start looking at the FTEs within this organization chart, you'll have a better understanding of where the people and how it would actually play out. I think that sounds really good.
So that's a broad overview, but I do want to hammer home that our administrative support personnel is really on the light side, and we need to, there's a lot of departments that need some help.
Right. Right. Oh. Yes, Peter? You gotta come up to the microphone.
I want to make sure you all are finished before I say anything. I was the one that was the liaison for the second floor, for the selectmen this past, before you guys got your binders. And one of the things that came out as a common theme is if they had a part-time secretary up on the second floor just to work the counter and answer phones, it would go a long way to have more efficiency and free them up to do other things. Because right now, you have Mike Leitzel, Brandon, Conservation, then Tim, and then Corinne on the front wall, we say. If Mike's out in the field a lot, Brandon's out in the field a lot doing inspections, if Tim is at lunch, the only person you got is Corinne.
What is Tim's position? What is
Tim
his?
Lyden is,
Assistant planner.
Okay.
and so so it's just Corinne, and if Corinne's out in her cubicle, she can't hear it, the person coming. So, and when we had the grant administrator, Lisa Devaney, here, she at times was the monitor at the counter for everybody, and, granted it wasn't her job description, but they said that a part-time secretary will go a long way towards freeing people up so they can keep on doing their task instead of stopping midway through and have to go to the counter, then go back, and, you lose track. So
Not only that, do you have people that are supposed to be doing higher level jobs, doing lower level jobs, and that's not a good, efficient way to run things.
You're
Yeah.
paying some very good money for some very smart people, no question, that are are doing tasks that perhaps aren't
I think that's,
in consort with the level of expertise that they have.
You're not getting the best
Bang
bang
for
for
the
your
buck.
buck on this one.
yeah.
And so, but that was the common theme that was given to me by various department heads up there, that they would like that, and I'm a firm believer of it as well, because, but we gotta figure out where the money's gonna come from, or what areas have too much and move people around, so that's up to the town administrator to decide what he feels is best, and
But
he'll
I
tell
think
us.
that kind of shared administrative person between what you call the second floor, which is planning, conservation, appeals, grants.
Well,
I mean,
that's on the
a-
other side, right, that's right.
But it's more of a suggestion, just to keep that in the back of your mind. And the other thing was economic development. Corinne said that if we can get an economic development officer, then she can start implementing her organizational chart of how her department would run. Because right now, if I'm doing economic development, I'm trying to bring business on the Main Street or doing grants, I can't be reviewing projects for the planning board and giving recommendations for the next meeting. So you have people wearing 9 different hats and doing the best they can, and I don't know, like I said, it takes money. I mean, the school department needs people too to help with their advanced learning goals and everything else. So it's got to be shared everywhere.
There are a number of grants or funding opportunities that come across our desks that we just don't have the people to be able to do the work. The county is very helpful. The commission's been very helpful in a lot of ways, but the Main Street grant, as an example, we had a few years ago here. That was $1 million and some change of Public Works Economic Development grant. Corinne and Mike Leitzel, but Corinne really did that grant, and that's a full-time job in itself, just managing the contractors and the bids and all of the things that have to be. You don't know, well, we do know what we're not getting done.
Well, I actually think we don't know what I don't think we know what we're not getting
Right.
done. And I think that what we need to be able to do is to talk about what it is we need to be able to do and how it needs to be done and what it would cost for us to do it. We need to have really specific information about and you know what this department does. We've got this great information of all the different things that the Department of Natural Resources does. And I think if we can duplicate this by department and we can really articulate to the taxpayer what it is that these people do and why we need this part-time administrative position and how this amount of money would benefit the town in other ways, I think that's the information that we need to put together and tell people, because I think it's out there, but I don't think it's articulated.
That's a good point.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Peter. It was good, very good information.
So we will provide to you the FTEs, and those types of things that you had requested.
Yeah, I gave a little template thing, but if
Yeah,
they
no,
have,
that's fine.
if they have a way that they do it already, have them do it their way. I mean, don't have them reinvent the, you know, I mean, I'm not trying to ask for extra work if it works, but if we can get it in a consistent,
Yeah.
if we can get it into a consistent format, then it becomes
I
much easier.
think this is a good template, that if we do it once, then we can, they can continue. Corinne's, overview is, it's spot on. It looks extensive, but it's really not for a town of this size and complexity. And,
That's what we need to know.
so,
Okay. All right, it's 8:30. We've had an hour and a half meeting after a meeting last night, so I think if everyone's okay, we'll just kind of.
Can I ask one question?
Sure.
And I don't mean to delay them, you know.
No, it's
the
okay.
meeting.
I didn't know you had a question.
The legal
mhm.
piece, on page 151-15, just clarification for me. It says, the top one is 5111, salaries department head. The department head for the.
That is the retainer, that is considered the retainer that we pay counsel, so he is exclusively, there's no conflict in other work that he does.
Okay, that
Yeah,
clarifies the
Yeah,
lot
there
for
you
me.
go.
Thank you. And then we get down to
There's a
his
misnomer.
5303, which is his salary.
Mhm.
Um,
Well, it's
the projected
Billable.
hours for the year.
correct.
Yeah, billable hours.
Billable hours, I should have said.
What's the I guess what's the basis?
That would be the top level.
Correct.
The arbitration,
That, yeah,
is that standard in the event that you don't expend that, and then that is give back money, or what?
yes, what we anticipate we're going to have some, based on history, so many arbitrations a year.
Right, I understand that, yeah.
So far this year, you'll see that we've spent about 23,000, a little shy of 23,000, 22,500. Last year, we spent almost 40. I expect that we have a couple of grievances that are throughout the organization right now for a number of different reasons, and I expect that probably 2 or 3 of those will end up either in mediation or arbitration. Mediation comes out of that as well.
But that's the, we've spent today 31,000 plus
We've
on 5314
For arbitration.
for arbitration.
Okay, you may have a more modern version than mine, because I have an older, mine's 22,525.
Oh, that's under outside counsel.
211.
I was
5314.
5314.
Right, yeah, no, you're right, my book is older than your book,
What's
so
your year? What's
you've
your
got an
date?
updated
What's your,
book.
ours is 211.
211.
Ours is a run of 211 on the bottom of the.
Yeah, mine's through 114.
Okay.
Okay.
There you go.
So,
So just another couple of weeks. 2 sets of books.
2 sets of books here, right?
We're gonna get
On this
updated.
book here.
We're gonna get updated.
As I go through, and as far as outside counsel to date I have here an expenditure of 25 and a few hundred, 25,000 plus.
Okay,
Now, again, those are just standard plugins because somewhere in that range up to there is what we may encumber as an expense.
correct. Now, currently, if the Finance Committee has been following, the Board of Selectmen authorized the use of outside associate counsel, we call them associate town counsel, relative to the turbine litigation. That will come out of that line.
What line is it coming out of this?
It will come out of
Outside
outside counsel.
That's gonna be, the bills are gonna be postponed till the next budget? Or
No,
you retain them now, so they're against the current budget now?
They're retained now, so they're against the current budget now, but that will transcend to the next year, I'm sure.
We have enough money to cover that? You're not gonna come back to us for more money? Recommendation?
We may very well have to come back for a reserve fund transfer on that. I'm not able to tell you what the estimated cost is on that right now, Mr. Town, Dr. Town.
Just so that I understand, at a select person's meeting, I believe the town council recommended against this action, that it was not in the best interest of the town. If I read what I was
Earlier.
reported in the newspaper. It was reported in the newspaper.
Well, town council, I believe, and I don't want to speak for him because he's not here, and my understanding, you're correct, in as far as you go with that, it dealt with an injunction on something that he believes, since they're not operating yet, there's no harm. Okay, what we have filed is in court is for a declaratory judgment relative to the town bylaw, the Board of Health regulation and bylaw being germane to the construction of the turbines relative to the land mass, the property lines and where the lines travel. That's what's been filed in court right now.
And that was, as I understand it, was when the additional attorney was brought on, and they filed it jointly, or they were part of the team that
Correct.
filed it.
Correct.
So that I have the understanding.
That's my understanding as well, Dr. Town.
I'm trying to be careful where I go.
Yeah, and I'm trying to be, right. We have filed, and that's a public record for a declaratory judgment.
Okay. And that we may or may not see something against this year's budget
Well,
come back to us.
legal expenses have averaged over the last 3 years, FY 13, 14, 15, have averaged 261,000. So it was, and you look at that 3-year turn back history, which probably other people don't have with them, but in 2013, we were budgeted 267,000, and we spent 251,000. But in FY 14, the budget was bumped up to 315,000. So it was bumped up like, $40,000, $50,000, but we still only spent 256,000. And then in FY 15, it was bumped up again another 7,000, and we only spent 277,000. So one of my concerns is that we have a lot of money that's in the legal. I'm not sure why it was bumped up from 267 to 322, if our average is like 261, so I think if we have a budget of 317,000 and we're averaging 261, that there's probably some money in there within that legal budget to be able to cover something if it comes in a little bit extra. And I would look to that before I do a reserve
And
fund.
that's part of it. Plus, we will have, although most of it will occur this year, although I do expect, just because I've been doing this a while, that we'll have some transcend into the next year. We're going to be negotiating all 8 bargaining units over the next 5 months, and I know a couple of those, barring any divine intervention, will probably run over.
Protracted, yeah.
Yeah.
It's just, pardon me, excuse me.
Go ahead.
It was just to get a sense of where we are, because this will be something that we may be visiting for a number of reasons at some point.
Correct.
And I just wanted to make sure what was in here, how close we were gonna be, so that we weren't going,
Council, we look at, in the selectmen too, we look at all of the cases that are pending, all of the cases that we think might be coming up, and we try to give an idea as best we can on what it's going to be. And yes, it's been a little less than we've anticipated over the last couple of years. Maybe we're being overly cautious. Again,
I kind of listen, I'd like to see, because we don't really get any information on what kind of cases we're involved in.
correct.
So, I don't need specifics of cases, but I would like to know we're in zoning appeal, we're in zoning cases, we've had, property tax assessment cases, we've had, some general cases, like, or collective bargaining, So in FY13, we had, these are kind of the general categories of legal.
Tax board and.
Yeah, I just as like a,
Yeah,
and I'm not trying to
No,
get,
no, I understand that.
but I'm trying to have an understanding of, this is a big budget, it's 300,000, and it's.
There are other things in here other than litigation as well. We do, there may be some disciplinary issues that I need guidance on with, there may be some FMLA issues that are more complicated than what the law is. So we seek counsel for a number.
Right, but that's also an interesting piece of information as we have reduced our human resources department. Are we gonna end up having, I don't know, and unless I look and see, what are our human resource related legal costs and what are our,
and, excuse me, this also applies, this covers the school department.
no, they have their own legal
own
budget.
legal-
They have, well, they utilize Bob for
I
some
just
things, but
wanted to
for
get,
labor purposes, they have their own labor council.
but if in fact there was something that went to a hearing at the State Department of Education because there was something that had to be brought in under special education or whatever, what attorney and what account would that come out of?
I think I believe, and I don't wanna speak with Steve on some of these specialty cases, they may have specialty
But
counsel.
I'm just asking,
Special needs counsel.
I think they have their own legal
Yeah.
budget of about 50,000 is what I.
They haven't spent a lot on that.
Yeah.
Steve's really, really good on a number of these things, but
but I'm just asking, having,
yeah, on a special ed type thing or those, it would certainly
in some
would be
cases, the
outside.
town council had done them, in other cases, it was the school department, and that's what I was just trying to get clarified for myself more than anything, so
And
I understand where it all
the-
fits.
The answer is as muddy as the question, it varies.
I think the town has to pay for advocates in special ed for the parents too, doesn't it?
Well, The
No.
town doesn't.
No,
pay
not
for it.
unless it's a judgment at the end.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
In special ed, I know if there's a second opinion that you request on something that's been an IEP or a defined disability, the parent has a right to request a second opinion that is covered, that it needs to be paid for by the district.
Yeah, the school district on the same way, on any depositions or anything that was out there.
Yeah, or sometimes if it's a frivolous suit, you can try and recover your legal
Right.
expenses.
Sometimes
If
they're
it's
not,
the judge to be that,
Sometimes
that's
they're not
a long
frivolous.
shot. but-
Doesn't happen with the
No, I
State
know it
Department.
doesn't.
and sometimes they're not frivolous.
Sometimes they're not, and sometimes you take the step of paying for your own advocate
you
and
do.
your own opinion, because that's the way you're going to get
The best.
what you're paying
Yes,
for.
yes, you do, don't you?
Yes, you do. Okay,
Mary Jane,
yes, Judy.
my
Yes,
husband's picking
okay.
me up at 20 up, so
Okay, so,
I
we're
thought
gonna-
that would be time enough for all of this.
I know.
Given that we were there the other night.
Okay, so if we get some kind of summary about legal, that would be good. And the other thing, I think, on the waterways, if we can get some sort of breakdown from Linda on how the waterways operational budget is applied, because there's that general law that applies to it. So
Right.
I'd like to see, this 213,000 is going to these positions or whatever, just so we know. Okay, any other, well, I don't have any minutes that I know of. We maybe have got them, but I don't.
We do it next meeting.
Future meeting, Monday.
Here.
Just keep those meetings rolling.
Monday. We're all scheduled in the community building for Mondays from now through the end of April.
You're welcome.
And,
Take the voters.
You know, it was funny, you put that out there and I replied to you immediately. John didn't see my reply to you immediately. Well, I'll have to see if, what we have to do with the custodian, so.
okay, is there any other comment? And can, public comment? Okay,
Move adjourned.
Second.
Aye.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.